Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of We Are the Weirdos, a bi-monthly, that's a thing, bi-monthly show here on Morbidly Beautiful's YouTube channel where I discuss all things women in horror. I'm your host, Nightmare Maven, and let's jump right into this one. So today I thought I would do something a little bit different than I have been doing in the past We Are the Weirdos episodes, and just introduce, define, talk about concepts in horror movies as it relates to women in horror. Does that make sense? You would have seen from the title, the topic of the video is the final girl. I thought to start off this like women in horror topic type of video, I would start with one that's like the most easily identifiable out of any female character in a horror movie. It's definitely the final girl. Okay, anyways, so let's just get into it. Like I said, I'm just gonna kind of introduce the concept and talk about it. Really, there's been so much said about the final girl that, you know, it could be like just on the final girl alone could be like its own video series all separately. So, like I said, the final girl is easily the most recognizable female character in the horror genre, and it was first coined by Carol J. Clover in her 1992 book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, which, as her subtitle, Gender in the Modern Horror Film, would suggest. It is a book about gender in modern horror, well, at the time it was written anyway. And I thought I would read how Clover defines the final girl. But this is kind of like the first introduction to the final girl in the book. And it reads, oh, and for posterity, I guess, it will show up on the screen, but this is page 35 of the 1992 version of this book. It reads, "The image of the distressed female most likely to linger in memory is the image of the one who did not die, the survivor, or final girl. She is the one who encounters the mutilated bodies of her friends and perceives the full extent of the preceding horror and of her own peril, who is chased, cornered, wounded, whom we see scream, stagger, fall, rise, and scream again. She is abject terror personified. If her friends knew they were about to die only seconds before the event, the final girl lives with the knowledge for long minutes or hours. She alone looks death in the face, but she alone also finds the strength either to stay the killer long enough to be rescued, ending A, or to kill him herself, ending B. But in either case, from 1974 on, the survivor figure has been female." That's a very nice description of the final girl, actually. Of course, as the book goes on, and as you can see in many a horror film, there are quite a few characteristics that pretty much every final girl has, especially during the heyday of final girls, which, as Clover kind of pointed out, was from in the book. She kind of starts it at Sally Hardesty from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Definitely the heyday of the final girls was in the 80s with the slashers. Some of the common characteristics that most of us know about the final girl, obviously the most talked about characteristic, I should say, is the fact that final girls are usually sexually unavailable or virginal. It's always mentioned, joked about, whatever, in horror movies that if you're a virgin, you're gonna survive till the end. Of course, a few movies have definitely played on this aspect, like Cherry Falls, where it's the exact opposite. The virgins are being killed. Second, also very popular characteristic, she avoids vices like illegal drug use or alcohol. So She doesn't partake in the smoking of weed, doesn't get drunk, she keeps a level head. That is very common characteristic of the final girl. Clover also points out in her book, this helps her to keep a level head, and she is able to, typically, most final girls can kind of foresee the danger coming that her friends cannot, because she has that level head. So the final girl usually gets an inkling that something is wrong much earlier on than the rest of the characters in the film do. These next two are not common with every final girl, but I thought were interesting characteristics that some final girls do share. They sometimes have a unisex name like Chris, Sydney, and they also sometimes share a history with the killer, which is also true, not for every single final girl, but for a lot of them. And another very popular talking point with the final girl is the fact that she becomes masculinized during the final confrontation with the killer by taking a weapon that is phallic in shape. So like a chainsaw, a knife, pretty much any weapon actually, with like the exception of a gun. Well, even then too, you know, if it's like a shotgun, you can compare anything to a phallus, seriously. That is another big point that Clover points out in her book, that in order to defeat the killer, the final girl must take on this phallus. You know, she must pick up that phallic shaped weapon in order to defeat the killer, which is almost always a male killer. All right, some famous examples of this final girl are, like I mentioned before, Sally Hardesty from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Laurie Strode from Halloween, Ellen Ripley from Alien, and Nancy Thompson from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Countless others. Another topic I wanted to bring up along with the final girl is one that's kind of becoming more and more popular as of late, which is the anti-final girl, or, you know, just a subversion of the final girl that we're used to that has all of those characteristics that I just mentioned. So as you can imagine, a subversion of this would be the exact opposite. And we can see instances of subverting these tropes as early as Scream, maybe even earlier. Sydney, spoiler alert, at the end of Scream, has sex and loses her virginity and ends up, spoiler alert, living through all 4 films in the franchise. So, but like I said, as of late, it's become more and more popular. We've seen final girls now that are like the blonde bitchy types. They drink, they have sex, they do everything that a final girl normally should not do, and yet they are able to make it to the end of the movie or kill the killer. Some recent examples of this, besides Sydney, who I just talked about, is Dana from Cabin in the Woods. They do mention in the movie that she is not a virgin, but she has those final girl qualities about her, like she is not blonde, which they do force upon the other girl, spoiler alert. Another good example is Erin from You're Next. I probably just should have said at the beginning of this video, every movie I talked about, I'm gonna spoil a bit, so if you haven't seen it, mute it or something. Instead of having to learn to defend herself and build up to that point where she's able to finally fight back, like your classic final girl, Erin, when shit goes down in the movie, already knows how to kick ass and take names, and that's a very clever subversion of the final girl trope and one of my personal favorites. Another one is Thomasin from The Witch. Again, just totally in general just takes the complete opposite route of the final girl. In a movie like that, typically you would have the final girl fighting against the forces of evil and Satan and demons or whatever, but again, spoiler alert, she signs the devil's book and becomes a witch. And most recently is Tree from Happy Death Day. What I liked about her character was that she was this just really awful, mean, bitchy, blonde sorority girl at the beginning of this movie, and in a typical slasher would be just, you know, easily pinpointed as part of the body count. Like there's no way that she would make it to the end of your typical slasher up against a classic final girl. but as her birthday repeats on and on and on, she's able to have this wonderful character arc where she turns into something more of a final girl. She turns into a better, kinder person, and that's what enables her to make her way to, you know, the following day, finally get out of that cycle. And I thought that was a really clever way to subvert the final girl tropes. And so that's really all I had on the final girl. I just really wanted to kind of discuss where the final girl came from and where it has come in recent years, with the kind of subversion of the final girl tropes. I think it does show that, you know, as a horror community, the filmmakers, everybody all together, we're all ready for different types of female characters in horror. And I think the subversion of the final girl, the anti-final girl, is a good sign of that. So let me know who your favorite final girl and your favorite anti-final girl is in the comment section down below. As always, you can find more horror goodness over at morbidlybeautiful.com. And until next time, I'm your host, Nightmare Maven. Stay strange.